Hello, it is finally time for the final part of this series. Today I'll be delving into the most recent installment in the Life is Strange series, True Colours. This one focuses on Alex Chen, who is going to live with her brother in Haven Springs after being in the Oregon foster care system for about 8 years. We take control of her as she enters Haven Springs, which seems to be completely normal at first until a tragic event occurs, which leads to an investigation into activities around Haven Springs. I'm not going to make some ironic joke this time about the power, because Alex does have one which I will explain here. She can read people's emotions and also feel them. This is quite a departure from the last few games' use of powers, and we will see if that works. Once again, I recommend you play this game because I'll be spoiling the whole thing. This will also be the last video before I rank every single Life is Strange episode, so let's see how True Colours compares to the rest of the series. One final note is that this game was not released episodically and instead was released all at once. So instead of them being called episodes now in this game, they are now called chapters. Chapter 1, Side A. Here we go once again. I don't remember much about this game, it's only my second playthrough.
Alex.
We start off with Alex when she is leaving the foster care group. She's been interviewed by someone. The person interviewing us makes note of us dealing with people, which sounds like a potential issue for us. Also references having other issues which are our power, spoiler alert. We say that nobody would know about this though when we get to the town. We'll have it undercover.
Alex, you know that I care about you. With everything that has happened, I just want what's best for you.
We start off by getting off the bus at Haven Springs after this. It's important to note that this game looks stunning. I love the scenery on the bridge here, and I'll just leave this up for a moment. Haven Springs is a gorgeous place, and I'll mention this a few more times throughout the game.
It's just so good to see
Our
you
brother
again.
then meets us on the bridge. His name is
can't believe
Gabe,
you're
which
here.
I actually didn't put in the script here, but yeah, that's his name. We then see some weird aura around our brother, which is our power in action. This is the first game where there isn't an inciting instant of the power,
She's all grown up.
although maybe Alex had one when she was younger. That isn't
I
explained.
missed it.
I'm a lot.
Whilst exploring the
Owner of
town,
the
we
flower
bump into
shops,
some random
and
old
honest to
lady
God,
called Eleanor
royalty
who runs the
of
flower
Haven
shop.
Springs.
Once again, the town looks really nice here on the main street. Turns out Gabe is buying apology flowers for his girlfriend,
Hey,
called
Gabe.
Charlotte.
Riley,
We also
meet
bump
my
into someone
sister,
called Riley in
Alex.
the flower shop. We find out she's an on-off relationship with
What's
some
your
guy
greatest
called Mac.
weakness?
There'll be more on him later.
Good to
Gabe
know.
is dating Charlotte, who I just mentioned, and we haven't met her yet. Whilst looking around the town, it is apparent that there is blasting taking place later by a mining company. I'm sure this won't be important.
Copies to sell in the record store.
Some
This is
random
awesome,
child
Ethan.
called Ethan bumps into
can't
us.
wait to
He's
read it.
Charlotte's son. Turns out he likes comics.
Are
And he
you
tells us he's going to
camping?
explore the old mine later, which
You
is
know
a
the
really
mines?
great idea. Go ahead and
I
do
know they
that.
exist.
There are a bunch of old tunnels all around the mountains. I think I found a way into one.
He'd save up for weeks
In
from
Haven
his
Springs,
shitty
there's
car
also
wash
a
job
record
just to buy
store,
us
which is
something to
pretty
listen
important to this game. We're there to buy a record for Gabe, who has one
crazy.
on hold.
Here I am.
We then
years
meet
later.
Steph for the first time, who is the same person from before the storm, if you remember. It is nice to see some familiar faces here. And our entrance to this record store may play into something else later on. Sure though.
Actually,
You also bump into Ryan in the record
was a
store.
pretty
He's
badass
good
older
friends with
brother.
Gabe. But
He
then
smokes
Steph comes out of this
cigarettes, which,
booth,
at the time, I
very
thought was
angry, which has an
awesome.
impact on Alex as she feels
And
the
he
emotions
somehow
of
managed
others.
to get his first tattoo
So Alex
when he was
seems
12.
quite upset almost, or
Damn.
quite flustered, I would
Legend
say,
only
when
grows.
Steph gets near her.
All right, you're looking at 20 even.
No, no way. I can't believe you're doing this
No.
again.
Come on.
Do you have any idea how much time I've put into this? You just... No, dude, I can't come over there. I'm working. called a job.
He's the best guide to Haven you could ever find.
You can really tell Ryan and Gabe are good friends when they
And
speak in the
this
record
dude
store. The game does a good job of making this
hands you the
town feel like a
best
proper community
beers.
in the first place. It feels like we are walking into a place that has been here for a while and all these people know of each
By the
other.
way,
You then get a choice to bait Ethan out to Gabe that he's going to explore the old mine.
I
I
should
do this
probably tell you
because
something.
it's stupid to let a child alone in some dangerous place like that.
Earlier, when Ethan and I were talking, he mentioned exploring some old mine.
Oh, man.
He seemed like he knew what he was doing, but I thought you'd...
As our tour of the town
His
continues, we
bossy
bump into
names.
Jed, who owns the bar
You
pub
own the
thing here
Black
called Black
Lantern.
Lantern, which Gabe
For the
works
last
at.
12 word of warning.
We also keep getting
Max
warned
got
about this
that
Met
old
guy
bug up
throughout
his
this
ass
intro,
again.
who apparently
So I've
wants to
heard.
see Gabe.
Yeah. So
More on that later
just,
again.
you know, eyes
But then we
open.
get into our apartment, or Gabe's apartment, I guess, and here's quite a nice place. I
Shit,
quite like the
man.
look of this apartment. The moments between Alex and Gabe at the start here are very wholesome, and I'm a big fan of them. But whilst they are performing a song, I guess, there's a knock at the door.
Hey,
The Met
Mac,
guy comes into our room and he starts interrogating Gabe about him meeting Riley earlier in the flower
can
shop.
I help you?
He accuses Gabe of sleeping with Riley, but we
Something's
know this
wrong.
isn't true at this point.
I read Riley's phone.
Obviously, Alex going to feel the
I
emotions
know you've
in
been
this
reading with her
conflict, so
behind my
she
back.
gets
It's not
quite
what you think, Mac.
upset or angry or everything. She then starts going crazy and goes to beat up Mech after Mech started attacking Gabe in the first place, I should add.
Stay.
Stay.
Mac gets absolutely annihilated by Alex, which is quite satisfying. This gives the same relief as when Nathan got beaten up in the first game by Warren. And it's quite a contrast to the wholesome moment we just saw with them performing the song in the apartment. It goes from that to brutal fight in moments. But more on the wholesome moments is that this is a thing this game does very well with these wholesome emotional moments. I quite like them, there's quite a few of them. I will mention this so many times throughout this, so you'll probably get tired of me saying that, but it's true.
I didn't...
Whilst you're controlling Alex in the free roam, well not free roam, but you know what I mean, when we're moving about, you can also see emotions from certain objects and
is there
items
like a
at certain
forwarding
points.
address
There's
on
an
file?
interesting one here about a John Chen. You can gather that Alex and Gabe's parents aren't about,
No.
which makes us wonder who
Hey,
John
no.
Chen is, but there'll be more on that later. I should add that the voice actor for Alex can really sing. Her name is Erica Mori. I'm not sure if she performs the song as Alex herself, but if she does, she's got a good voice. If not, then I don't know. She does a cover of Creep in our apartment, which is maybe a bit of an eye roll at the on-the-nose nature of that, with what we've learned about Alex so far, but I can allow it.
With
In the
this.
bar downstairs, when we go there, Mech tries to speak to us to try and hide the info about that fight from Riley. But no, he can hold that. I don't care. I bait him out and tell him what he did to Riley. Mech tries to blatantly lie,
Yeah,
but
I was
then
there.
Riley breaks up with him
Max
as
telling
a
you a
result
whole
of
lot
that.
of bullshit.
In the bar, we do some work for Jed filling, because Gabe was meant to work, but he went to get treatment for the injuries he got by getting beaten the crap out of. We bump into some other side characters whilst doing this work, who I'll mention later. It's not important now.
Hey there.
Steph is also in the bar, though. She is about to tell us that Jed
Have you
saved a
heard
bunch
about
of
Jed's rescue?
miners once, but is interrupted by Jed in the
It
middle of
was
that.
a big deal.
We also learn that Jed is
Back when he
Ryan's
was a minor,
father.
He
I
saved...
can't imagine.
Now, that miner
Also,
story I
it's
just
an
mentioned, that
earload
may
of
be
Haven
important
trivia just now.
near the end of the game.
Sorry, Jed.
Once our shift is done, we go to the rooftop to
Need a
speak to
manager
Gabe, and
for
once
your
again,
underground
this game
stage fighting
is
career?
beautiful. The main thing to draw
When
from
you
this
hit me,
conversation between
I
Alex
was
and
angry.
Gabe is them discussing Alex beating the crap out of Mac,
Then
and
I
also
thought
actually
about-
hitting Gabe.
How you took him apart.
We then get an option to tell Gabe about our power, but I don't, because I don't know if it's just me, but it would be kind of troubling to know that your own sibling could read most of your
Growing up
thoughts.
in the system was hell.
I don't know, though. Alex explaining her past here is quite
When I first
upsetting, though,
foster home,
when she speaks
an
to
older
Gabe,
boy followed
and
me into the
it's how she's
bathroom.
never been in a stable living
so I
environment.
pushed him out.
This will be clear by the end of the game, though. We'll get first-hand
Got
experience of
angry.
this living environment.
So did I.
Gabe then hands us a match, which is very important to him, but he still wants us to have it, and I'm sure this won't come in use later. It will. Gabe says he got this match whilst he was still in juvie. Clearly, the siblings here have had troubled
reminder.
pasts. I wonder why.
Looks like a match to me.
Another thing to note in this conversation
That
is
was
it
the
boiling down
last
to
matchbook
Alex
I
wanting
got when I
to
was
start a
still in
new
juvie.
life here, outside of the foster
Did some
system.
pretty unsavory stuff to score it.
Once again, this game does fill me with that sense of
Do
hope,
you
and I
still have it?
really believe that Alex can do this.
I carry it with me everywhere.
It's an uplifting game, which is in contrast to the other two
When I
Life is
got out,
Strange games, which
I
are
went to the
quite
last few
dark at
matches real
points.
quick.
This one sort of steers
Obviously.
clear of that mostly.
I could never bring
But I'll
myself
mention
to
more
use the
about
last
this
one.
when reviewing the game as a whole.
It reminded me. What's up?
Hey,
It then turns out that Ethan
Is
actually
Ethan up
still
here?
went up to the mountains despite us telling
No,
Gabe
he was
about
heading
it.
home.
We'll get into the
He
choice
was.
element later.
haven't seen him in
But-
a while.
At this point, we head up to the mines.
Team up at the site.
Gabe says they are postponing these
postpone
scheduled
tonight's blast
blasts
until
that
we
were
find
meant to happen later due to Ethan
least
being
we're
in the
not
area
wasting
of
the
the
clock.
blasts. Maybe Gabe's saying that's a bit
You
awkward
good?
though, given the context of what's about to
Charlotte's
happen.
got to be losing it right now.
But then we actually learn the story about Jed also,
Sure.
that he led a bunch of trap miners to the
Massive
surface.
cave-in. Bunch
What a
of
nice
trapped
guy.
Miners all nearly died. Jed led the whole team back to the surface.
It turns out these comics that Ethan gave to us
No
earlier
shit.
are basically
I'll be
a
damned.
guide to find
The
him.
whole story is about Ethan's character.
One thing I will
breaking
note though,
into a
when
monster
Ryan, Gabe, and
stronghold
Alex are searching for
deep
Ethan, they seem
underground.
way too upbeat.
Sounds like the mine to me.
You
Does
think
it
there'd
show
be a
where
bit
he
more
went?
fear between them? I'm not
For
sure though.
sure. The comic ends with the
After
monster
searching for a
hunter
while though, we
claiming
find
a
Ethan on
washed-
the edge of the ravine. And how the hell did he get there? I'm not sure.
Ethan!
There's a tree trunk connecting
Alex!
one ravine to the other, and we have to go across that. Because Gabe and Ryan are too heavy, it is Alex's job to go over.
I'm here to help, okay?
Whilst on the tree trunk, Alex can see that Ethan is extremely scared, but not what I think. He seems he can see something.
It's too much. I have to get him.
Now here we can
to
see
chill.
Alex in this moment where she's trying to save Ethan. She can take over other people's emotions to sort of try and feel what Ethan is so she can relate to him on a deeper level and convince him to come over with her. I will say this is quite well done in this moment.
What's happening?
Whilst we're going back over, the log then cracks, but we somehow stay on and make it back over safely. You can see the relief on us once we are over. But then the sirens start blaring, which is a cue for the blast, which wasn't meant to happen obviously. There's an explosion of rocks. Gabe is then hit by a rock and sent into the ravine. Now, don't worry, he's safe. There's a rope connecting us with him. No, he's not. I completely lied. Ryan has to cut the rope, because if he doesn't, Alex also is going over into that ravine. It's a pretty shocking end to the episode. I wonder if Gabe died. We'll find out next episode. We won't. Well, we will. He died. You don't need to worry. Well, I guess you need to worry, but you don't need to question it. Yeah, it's pretty clear anyway. Now, this is a solid enough first episode, but an issue with this for me specifically is that this is the first Life is Strange game that I played on release. I pre-ordered this game. I was looking forward to it a lot. So I'd seen all the promo for it. I knew that Gabe would die before I even played the game because that was a big promo part of it about your brother dying. So it takes away the main moment of this episode for me, which really lessened the appeal. When I played it, the whole episode, I knew he was going to die. I was just waiting for it. I don't like how they made the promos for this game something that takes about 2 hours to happen. Like, the entire first episode is sort of a write-off in that regard because I know what was going to happen. Now, for the second Life is Strange game, I'm pretty sure the promo for that was about your father not being there, but that happens a third of the way into that episode. Maybe even less. As I said, when I played this, I was just waiting for the inevitable to happen. It kind of felt like this episode was a demo in that regard. Despite that, I still like the atmosphere this episode brings, and it does well as an introduction to the town and the characters. Once again, the issue is the plot of this game doesn't actually start in this episode. It's just sort of like a setup. Which I don't mind, but it will be an issue when we look at the runtime later. As I said, it's a third of the runtime nearly, this one episode, a third of 5 episodes or chapters, whatever. Which is insane. And again, I'll mention more on that later. Despite this though, this is still a fine episode, and I'd probably put it into the C tier. Chapter 2, Lanterns. This chapter starts off with a memorial for Gabe after his death in the last
I'm not
episode.
big on speeches.
Jed says some words, others saying some nice words about him.
I've always
Another example of
believed
this
that
game doing the
role of
emotional
the
moments well,
bartender
with a slight tinge of
is to shut up
optimism
and
amidst grief. Ryan,
And by
during
that
this
measure,
wake, is pressing about the
Gabe,
mine doing the blast
son,
despite him ringing
now
towards
is
the
not
blast.
the time.
Max says he
Gabe
was working for the
called
mine company
the
this
mine.
time and he would be handling the calls and he
I
got
gave
nothing.
him my sat phone to be sure.
Ryan
he
makes
could
some
get
good
through.
points here which I'll let play.
They
Max
fucked
seems
up.
a bit suspicious here in denying this call when we knew
And
it
now?
happened. We saw it. Mac then accuses Ryan of cutting the
Now
rope
Gabe's
to
dead.
kill him. which actually doesn't get mentioned after
That
this
was
point,
my
surprisingly. I'm surprised they didn't bring it up once here and then it never gets mentioned again.
If anyone
Obviously,
had
Ryan's not guilty of
called,
anything,
it
but
would have gone through me.
clearly might have troubled him. I'm not
Nobody
sure.
called.
You're lying. In front of Gabe's own fucking sister. Alex heard the whole thing.
He's right. I was there when Gabe made the call.
I'd like to hear what you have to say about that, Mac.
I'm not saying anything. Just, I didn't get a call. Draw your own conclusions.
I'm not the one who killed him.
Aren't you, though?
What the fuck did you just say?
Ryan, back off.
Oh, I'm just saying. I thought I heard that you
Mac,
were the one.
you shut the hell up.
No. No, go ahead. You got something to say, Mac? Let's fucking hear it.
Come on, guys. Don't make me intervene.
All right, fine. As long as we're tossing around accusations, way I hear it, you're the guy who cut the rope.
Try to pop wheelies outside the record
After this
store
wake, though,
to
which
make me
ends a bit
laugh.
badly, Steph then comes up to our room and
Never
shares
worked.
memories about Gabe. There's some more emotional
Totally
moments
wiped
with
out.
Steph here.
That
The
was
soundtrack also, I
hilarious.
should mention in this game at this point. This game leans very heavily on its music and soundtrack. Too much to the point where I don't want to mention songs individually. I'll just leave up the soundtrack thing here because there's too many songs, I said.
Get the
Jed
kind of
then
closure
warns
you're
us on
looking
pinning
for.
our hopes on getting
If you get
closure
any at
based on
all,
Mac,
Just
as he's a bit of an unreliable guy.
don't pin
Also
all
says
your
we're
hopes
welcome to
on
stay
Mac
for as long
Rowley.
as we want in this apartment. Which is nice of him.
He
When
asked me to leave
investigating
Haven
the
with him.
town, it turns out Mac asked
What?
Riley to leave Haven with him, which is kind
Right
of
after the wake.
suspicious.
He wouldn't tell me why. But he just looked so guilty. I told him no, and that we were done. And now I'm scared he did something horrible.
Relating to the mining company as well, which is called Typhon, I
don't
also
think
tell
we should
Charlotte,
sign it.
Gabe's significant other, when he
I'm
died,
sorry. I
to
know
not sign
it's
an
hard,
affidavit and not press
but you can't
charges.
let
I don't want
Typhon
to
buy you
sign
off.
it because it would
Gabe
apply less
made that
pressure to this
call,
mining company who we think may have something to
and
do
I'm
with the death
gonna
of
prove
Gabe.
I just
We can do some other small
Need
things
some
about
time.
town in this episode, like we speak to
really
Steph
hard.
about this LARP thing in the
But what you
record
did for
store,
me
which
this
will be
morning
important
got me
next
thinking.
episode.
What if
We
Ethan
then like make
did
a character
something
we
like that too?
play as.
Something fun and distracting. Something like a LARP.
like the one you and Gabe were gonna take him to.
Yeah, but designed just for him and Thanor.
Another interesting moment
must
here in
have
this
put the
chapter is just
sign
finding
to
Eleanor in
open.
the flower shop. She's showing signs of dementia, so we have to help her
always
manage
look
the
at first thing when I
shop
come in.
in this moment. She
Then
is quite
I
scared and
open my
confused.
mail.
I quite like this moment on its own, but it does seem a bit
Unless it
out of
distracted
place.
me.
Again, there's more ammunition now about my point on the emotional moments being done well in this game.
We can do this.
It's quite satisfying, this moment. She also forgets about Gabe's death, and you can tell her, but obviously with other conditions she will just forget again.
Probably doesn't know the
Although I
difference
actually think
between
telling her
lying
about
and
Gabe's death is the better choice for the end of the game, but
Don't
I'm
sell him
not
short.
100%
He's
sure.
more clever than he seems.
We then finally bump into Mac
An
about town as he
explanation
spent
about
so
what
long
happened.
looking for him. He seems very scared about what's happened.
Cost him my
He then
girlfriend
runs
wasn't
away
enough
from
for you.
us. This moment is quite
learned that
weird. We get some dark imagery with Mac when we're exploring memories related to him when we're chasing after him.
Typhon's forcing
But
you
we
to
catch up to
unite
him.
with
We
the
learn that Mac did get a call, and he did tell Typhon to call off the detonation, but they didn't do it. Mac was another red herring, like they were in the first game, but for this one it didn't even take a chapter, or episode, or whatever you want to call it, to figure this out. At least in the first game we got gaslit by David for most of it. But regardless of that, we learn that Typhon are the real enemies here. We tell Mac that we will get to the bottom of Typhon to uncover what actually happened the
This
night
wasn't
Gabe
some
died.
accident. I told them you were down there, and they detonated it.
We then end up near a cliff. I think it is the ravine where Gabe died,
were
but I
right.
could be completely wrong. You need to correct me in that case.
about
Ryan is
Typhon,
really
about
grieving
Mac.
now about the loss of Gabe, which
Alex.
is natural due to their
Mac got the
friendship.
call.
We can say that we forgive Ryan, but I mean, there's nothing to forgive him for. He did nothing wrong. He saved us, if anything. We should be thanking him.
How could I not? You're not alone.
We end up reminiscing about Gabe with him, which is quite a fun moment.
But it's Gabe's favorite
The
place.
scenery is really nice here once again. It's reminiscent of the first episode of Before the Storm when looking through the viewfinders. We then tell Ryan about our power, first person we say this to. We don't have a choice in this.
You never made anyone
Something I
laugh
found
like
weird
you.
though is that Ryan doesn't instantly react to us saying we know what he's feeling. But we then learn a pretty funny story about Ryan making Gabe bury a goose that he ran out over, where he tricks him.
Shut up. It is not.
Which is just
There
another
can be
nice
no
moment
Gabe.
in this chapter.
Property of the crown.
The crown of...
Property of the
After this, the
crown.
episode then
Speak
ends
this
really
morning.
quickly though, with us setting off these lanterns that we did at the end of the second game in the canyon. But this time these lanterns are sort of a memorial for
Hearing
Gabe.
everyone
Alex
talk
talks
about
about
him,
Gabe, saying she didn't have a
about the
chance to have the
life
life
he
he
had
had in
here
Haven
with all
Springs,
of
but
you.
that she thinks she belongs here already.
Lost
Everyone
the
feels
chance
joy in
to
this
have
moment,
that.
we can clearly see with the aura around them, except from the Typhon employee Diane, who we met in the first chapter, who experienced a different emotion. I think it's sort of like fear, in a way she's feeling, I'm pretty sure. But that's a nice cliffhanger here to leave this chapter off, which further shows that Typhon are probably guilty. Yeah, this chapter's just alright. Not much actually happens here, and most of the episode is actually skippable, like literally skippable, you don't have to do it in the town. Now, this episode is where the runtime starts to become an issue. You can really see why they released the game all at once here, because even when doing everything possible in this episode, I didn't even make it to 2 hours runtime. I'll compare the full playtimes after the 5th chapter, but the fact is it's not even 2 hours and a lot of it is optional means that if you went through this so quickly and missed things, you could be looking at barely an hour of playtime in a Life is Strange chapter. That's insane given when you compare it to the other ones. That being said, the emotional note's still hitting this episode, and I like the atmosphere of Haven Springs, so it's probably just another low C tier, because it doesn't touch the levels of that 4th episode of the second game, which is really bad. Chapter 3, Monster or Mortal. Chapter 3 begins at the bar with Ryan and Steph. We tell Steph our power, and she is quite confused
You're both
also.
fucking with me, right?
We also
Something
discuss
around Gabe's
Diane
death.
being afraid from the
Is
last
she covering
episode
up what Typhon did?
about
bet
something to
there's
do with
proof.
Gabe's death.
I hope so.
Diane then strolls up into the bar conveniently, and we
asked
form a plan
Diane
to try and get
out
a
on a date.
laptop. It
Wait,
involves
what?
distracting
She's
her.
so into it. She doesn't notice one Ryan Lucan swiping her laptop. Ryan carries said laptop upstairs, acquiring damning evidence. Maybe Diane and I still hook up? Not important.
We then speak to Diane to try and get a read on her and see what she's feeling. You can clearly see the death of Gabe impacting Diane. And given she works for Typhon, this may be a surprise.
Typhon is doing everything we can to
We
address
learn
the
that
situation.
she is a
That's
bit
the
puzzled
truth.
or troubled with the fact that she
Okay.
can't undo all that Typhon did. But that she does have information to protect herself from Typhon if the time comes. We get Steph to play a distraction role pretty well here, and she does. We then gain this USB, it turns out we need that on the laptop. You can see pieces of
Taken,
humanity
but
poking
still
from
down to
Diane
get
at
drunk
some
and make
points,
out?
but it is obvious she still is a tool
Whoa.
of this big corporation.
Was not expecting that at all. I'm so flattered. I don't even know what to say.
Hey, no sweat. Just
I don't
This LARP
need,
thing we planned and is about to start also, and
cheering up.
it's planned for
whatever.
Ethan. And he starts getting upset before this, so we have to convince him
Okay.
to do it. If you don't know
So,
what LARP is, just Google it.
maybe
I'm
this
not
wasn't the
educated
most
enough to
subtle
explain fully
idea,
myself. And this LARP thing, it's cool enough for what it is, but at the end of the day, me personally, I
Distortion
don't
field.
really care for it, and it takes away from the main part of the game
Damage for
for
the
me.
next 2
The main thing to
turns.
note here is some foreshadowing with Jed.
Lord
Starts
of
as a
the
nice guy and
Underworld.
isn't one. Maybe he'll do this
Should've
later.
known King Tabor was you all
Once we're
along.
done, the sirens for
fools.
blasting start
Finding-
blaring after this LARP, and obviously Ethan gets some sort of PTSD. Because, I mean, he kind of rightfully blames himself for Gabe dying. I mean, you kind of cause it. I mean, obviously Typhon is still mainly at fault, but you shouldn't have run off into the mines yourself. But obviously he's a child and all,
Shit.
so
Gabe's dead.
maybe it's not funny.
Gabe's dead because of me. It's my fault. I killed Gabe. I killed Gabe.
Furthermore, I should add that
killed
this LARP
Gabe.
thing takes nearly an hour if you do everything. So, if you don't care for it in my case, then that is most of the episode out the window for you. We then speak to Charlotte after the LARP. She gets really angry at us. Then we get some weird emotion reading type thing afterwards, which explains why she is so angry after the game of death. She blames numerous people for this. Firstly us and Ryan, but mainly she blames Ethan, her own son, for not listening and going to the mines, which is not what I'd said. She tells us that she hates her son. You can take her anger away from her here, which I choose not to. It feels quite intrusive, and she should deal with her grief and emotions in her own way, I think. Also, this is another instance of us gaining the power mid-game. In both cases, it's in the middle of episode 3, or chapter 3 in this case. Although this lacks the impact that gaining the power had in that game though, because the legendary scene we got from that was unforgettable. This one's just a bit there. Once we're done with Charlotte, we then go back to the apartment to go over this USB stick we gained earlier. We hear the call that Gabe made to Mac, which proves that the call was real. We can tell that Typhon ignored the request to stop the call. We learn some more sus stuff about them through this USB stick, which basically leads to us knowing that they used this blast in that night to cover another blast in one of their old mines. Once we gathered information, we inferred that they were burying something. That's an old site. Which ends the episode of us wondering what the hell they are burying. I'm kidding you, that is literally it for that episode. It's shockingly short.
They were burying something.
Yeah, the stuff that matters in this episode's alright, but barely anything happens. The LARP has no relevance to the main plot, and there's something that could be cool, but not when it takes up half of a chapter. The Typhon stuff in this episode is fun enough, but it's barely a third of the runtime, and all it involves is seeing the USB stick and seeing what's on it. That's literally it. I have no other choice but to put this episode in D tier solely because of the LARP. Now look, this is just my opinion. I still think the LARP is well done, it's just not me personally. You might have already enjoyed it. But hopefully next episode picks this up for me. Chapter 4, Flicker. We start off by speaking to Pike on the phone about the USB we have and saying that we have enough to deal with Typhon.
And plenty more.
This episode starts off with a spring festival. There's another nice moment. You can have a ducky at the bar reminiscing about his deceased wife. The issue is you can skip this also if you miss it. But this festival is filled with wholesome moments, which I've banged on enough about already.
Who else?
Then there's a live performance with Steph at the festival, which is pretty nice. You get quite a funny moment here. Similar to before the play and before the storm. We get forced into performing without knowing, basically.
Who else is playing? I hate you both.
We didn't want you to wuss out.
Charlotte then speaks to us and says she wanted us to be friends when she arrived, and hopefully that can still happen despite the death of Gabe and the trauma associated with that.
We were gonna be best friends. I wish.
Stefan tells us that she is planning to leave Haven Springs. She wants us to leave with her to perform music around cities in the US. Here is our romance option with her here, and I choose Steph over Ryan. I just find her a much more compelling character personally. Maybe because we spent more time with her. I just think the relationship options in this game are slightly underdeveloped. Though given the fact we don't spend enough time with them, it's not awful for what we get, and I still enjoy the moment with Steph here on the balcony.
I mean, obviously, I like you a lot, Alex. You mean the fucking world to me. Kiss me. Kiss me. Kiss me. Kiss me.
Pike then speaks to us about the Typhon stuff, and he says we need to go to the station because obviously we did kind of steal the USB. We learned that we can't use the USB as evidence because the investigation is closed, which is quite convenient for Typhon.
They're the criminals here.
Pike then starts threatening us with long prison sentences and telling us basically how powerful Typhon are. He also seems intrigued when we say that Typhon were covering up another blast. He didn't ask us to sign a form that we won't investigate Typhon further and they won't press charges on us. Pike also says it turns out Typhon was surveilling us. They are quite a powerful entity clearly, and they have strong control over this town. You have an option to take Pike's fear about Typhon away from him here, and I choose to do it here. Mainly just to see what happens, because I didn't know my last playthrough. I don't really know what the right or wrong option is here. He then lets us leave, which I'm unsure as to how the police department would let this happen. We're still being charged, I'm not sure though. And Pike didn't really do anything, he just sat in the room with us. Also, the choices mean nothing, but I'll get to that. I'll get to the next chapter. Later on in the evening, we get a note from Jed to see us when we can. We do go to see him, and he's framed in quite a suspicious manner here, which kind of makes it a little bit obvious.
There she is.
What's about to happen next?
Have a seat.
He inquires about what's going on with us, basically curious as to what we're doing. We then tell him about Typhon.
Fuck it. What have I got to lose? Chasing proof that Typhon was responsible for Gabe's death. And I found out they buried something. A secret. Now they're threatening me. And Steph. And Ryan.
Threatened? How?
Pike showed me photos. Typhon's been watching us.
I know what they're hiding.
Jed then says he knows what they are hiding, which obviously piques our interest. He says Typhon is the devil that's run this town for far too long. Then says he will show us what they are hiding. Stupidly, we follow him out into the forest near the abandoned mines. We look into the mine, and then we pan to Jed pointing the gun at us behind us.
I do. 12 years ago, I made a mistake. The kind of thing that you can't undo. But Typhon made me a deal. A way to save my town. Give my boy a normal life. I never wanted Gabe to get hurt.
Go to hell.
He says he made a mistake years ago, which is the kind of thing he can't undo. Furthermore, he mentions that Typhon made a deal with him to save the town and give his boy a normal life. We then get shot and fly into the shaft. Obviously, really obvious, I don't know why I'm saying this, it proves that Jed is tied deeply into the secrets around this town and how evil he is. If he was willing to attempt to murder someone as abruptly just because they're snooping around Typhon's mines. That's it for the chapter, by the way. This chapter is the shortest by far. It barely touches over an hour. Despite that though, content-wise, this is probably the best up to this point. The festival is a really nice moment. The atmosphere here is beautiful. For what it's worth, Jed does feel like a budget Jefferson. But I feel like episode for episode so far, this one has the best momentum and kept me engaged the whole time despite being short. The major issue is, again, is it's barely over an hour long. I feel like if this was a fully fleshed out episode though, it could be in that top tier Life is Strange episode. Due to the runtime though, I feel like I'm going to fit in the C tier. Despite enjoying it, this game just rushes to its conclusions due to a lack of content, which we'll touch on within all the chapters. I should also mention that I know I called Jed a budget Jefferson, but I have more to say on him, which I'll say next chapter. Chapter 5, Side B. Now for the finale of True Colors. We start at the interview room where the game begins. We're questioned about our time in Haven Springs, then some weird stuff happens which tells us we aren't actually in reality. We then have like a puzzle dream sequence again, which you'll know I'm not too crazy on, but maybe this one's an improvement on the first games.
Alex Chen?
In the middle of this sequence we start dripping with blood as we vaguely return to reality when we've just been sent down the mine shaft. Our injuries don't look too good at this point. One question I have here is how the hell does Alex survive this fall though? She should be dead. But it then cuts away from reality once again to get into some flashback sort of dream things with Gabe in a hospital. He tells us that we are younger, obviously, and our mother is gravely ill. And our father is also ill, but not physically.
Yep.
Mentally,
Definitely
obviously.
Alex.
We then see our father for the first time here. Obviously, he's referenced in the first chapter through the memory, but we physically see him here. He tells us to check on our mother in the hospital. We see her for the first time. She speaks to us about being strong after she is gone, which hits emotionally, personally. Our mother also insists that we be there for our brother and father, which we know doesn't exactly go quite to plan.
Your brother, your father, they are going to need you. You have to be strong.
These flashbacks then carry on back to the family house. Alex is in the middle of watching her father and brother argue quite badly. I really like these flashback scenes. They add a lot of character to Alex, which makes me like her more. We learn in this flashback though that our dad lost his job once again, so there's no money in the household. I really feel for Alex here trying to diffuse this argument between the two senior figures in her life. She then gets accidentally hit by her father as a result of him and Gabe arguing, and clearly our dad feels great guilt and he just gives up. He walks out of the apartment or house, whatever we live in, and he abandons both his children. Alex then chucks this photo holder thing at our father, which our mother gave us. He just picks it up and walks out, leaving his two children alone.
Don't fucking touch me, piece of shit!
Dad.
Damn it, Alex!
I'm okay. Dad.
I'm sorry.
No. Dad!
We then end up in an orphanage as these flashbacks continue. Gabe tells us we need to be honest about our past. We finally see how we've been in this system for years, which has been mentioned throughout the game. We sit on some stool at the edge of this room. We're basically judged by potential parents that we could have had, but they deny us as a result of our traumatic past and Alex's whole mentality, which is only natural because she's obviously going to be a bit traumatized over her adolescence and childhood, because it's been pretty crap for her. She's been dealt a poor hand. She then breaks down as a result of all this trauma that's been dumped on her throughout her life. Gabe apologises for not being there for Alex. He was obviously in juvie and separated from her, which isn't their fault. Their father really didn't help them in life.
You couldn't keep us together.
Gabe also inspires us to get back up and fight properly, which we have done since being in Haven Springs. One thing I will say about these flashback moments is I would have preferred if they were separated over all the chapters. They kind of dumped on us all at once, which tells you maybe they didn't have enough content for this final chapter, which is sort of a theme with Life is Strange games.
Sometimes it's a big shit sandwich. Make it better.
The runtime in this chapter is already short enough, which is a consistent theme throughout this game.
But don't give up.
Although, I forgot how much I enjoyed these flashbacks. On the second playthrough, I really did enjoy them, more than I remembered. And I've said this so many times at this point, but it's another example of this game getting the emotional moment spot on.
You have a gift.
We then cut back to reality and we wake up at the bottom of the mine after our fall. And I know I said earlier that how did Alex not die, but I guess she did sort of break her fall when she was falling. But come on, like, one of her legs should be shattered, obviously. Like, that was a pretty deep fall. This match that Gabe then gave us comes in big for us. This is the one he gave us before he died. And it gives us light because there's a lantern next to us that we can set alight. We walk down this mine, which is pretty spooky, and it doesn't take long until our lantern dies though and goes pitch black. But then luckily, for some reason, some massive red glow illuminates the whole mine and we can see through. This is obviously related to some emotional thing that happens down here, which we can see somehow. I mean, we can always see emotions, but not to this level.
All right, boys.
This light that we can see then leads us to learn that Jed carried on a job down here that he should have never, and it led to the death of 7 miners, which is what obviously Typhon were trying to cover up.
This is what Typhon tried to bury.
A lot of runoff moisture in this soil. Jed, we gotta call it. This dig is fucked.
Nothing's fucked.
Jed, we got no pumps running. No.
My teams have never quit a dig this deep before. We finish the job. Steady goes. Steady.
Fuck was... Move! Come on! Clear the tunnel!
Who's on radio?
Jed!
Fuck! Jed! Jed!
Oh my god.
We gotta move now! There's still men back there. They'll drown.
Yeah, and so will we if we don't get the fuck out! Make the call, Jed!
God damn it! God damn it! Everyone, let's go! Now!
In some astonishing coincidence, we then find that photo holder on one of my games started down here, and it turns out our father died in the mines. Now, I get the father dying here, that makes complete sense. It makes sense to why Gabe ended up in Haven Springs in the first place, because he was trying to track down his father. But it is a bit too convenient that one photo holder we saw in the flashbacks conveniently ends up right here.
It's over, Chen. He's not coming back.
I'm sorry. I'm so sorry.
We then cut to Alex leaving the mines, which I'm confused as to how she got out with no light and no knowledge of the mine she was in. She takes down some sign commemorating Jed for supposedly saving the miners, which we now know is false. It then cuts to the Black Lantern, where every main character is located, and discovering Typhon furthering its involvement in Haven. Alex then walks in as Jed is speaking. He tries to act like nothing has happened here, which is quite funny given the severity of what actually happened down in the mines.
And so has Jed Lucan.
Alex, what's going on?
You know exactly what's going on. I was down in the mine last night. I saw what Typhon's been hiding for 12 years. Jed Lucan isn't a hero. That whole story is a lie. Jed caused the accident. And then he abandoned 7 of his men. He let them drown to save himself. There were pictures of me and Gabe down there in the dirt. Because one of those miners was my father.
Diane then plays up to try and make it seem crazy. Despite this though, most of the other characters in my playthrough agree with me when I try to explain what actually happened in the mines. Ryan then starts to question Jed and he gets quite angry. Jed, I mean. We're going to start absolutely berating Jed about his mistakes and what his actions have led to. We say he's tricked himself into thinking he's a better person than he is. I'll let this play out here as well, because there's some severe stuff here and it's pretty dark, I'll say, in how we take down Jed.
I know it's easier not having to think about the men you buried. You want to look away and pretend the people you hurt aren't people. But I won't let you. My big brother. He was building a family here. Doing it his own way. Figuring it out as he went along. He was so nervous about it. And so excited. And he brought me here to be part of that family. But he died. Because of you. And then there's me. For so many years, I just wanted to survive. To get through. Haven changed me. I started to think about the future. I want to belong somewhere. I want to know that there's a place and a group of people who wouldn't be the same without me. You hate what you did in the past. You hate what you've done to keep it secret. And the more you deny that hatred, the worse it grows. I know who you are. I've seen the worst parts of you. And I condemn you.
I end up condemning Jed here because of what his actions led to for us, specifically. He killed our father, basically. His actions then led to our brother dying, and then he tried to kill us. He then breaks down emotionally. This is a really structured psychological breakdown of Jed. As I said, we broke down this character into these incidents and explained how this one incident shaped the man he is today. This obviously finishes him mentally, which makes him come clean. After this, we then end up in our apartment and we find out that Jed is in custody. Typhon, the CEO, has also resigned. Now, I have some critiques of what we just saw before. It does not matter what you do in your playthrough, the outcome is the same no matter what, which brings me to the choices. This is the game where they mattered the least, which is honestly impressive, given what the first game Before the Storm had with choices where they didn't really matter either. I genuinely think it would have been an incredible ending here if your relationship with the community impacted the ending. For instance, if they agreed with you about Typhon and Jed, the ending would differ based on that. But no, it doesn't happen. It would be interesting again if that was similar to the second game, where your choices throughout the game made an impact, but no, they don't. You can blatantly ignore all those in the town, and it makes no difference.
What you did at the council meeting, it was the bravest thing I've ever seen. And it made me want to be brave.
Steph then rolls up to our apartment and says what we did was brave.
Here it goes.
She says she wants to be with us no matter what, and we'll do whatever we want, whether that be leaving or staying. This then leads us to speak into Gabe's memory, basically on the balcony. We ask him what we should do. Firstly, he says to stay because we have what we want here. But then he says leave may be better to give the music film a real shot and to sort of escape our trauma, I guess I inferred that at least.
You finally have a home, a job, people who actually like you. Why would you give that up?
That's true.
Then again, maybe leaving would be better.
What?
You're young, you suddenly have a little money, friends. And don't you think it's time to give this music thing a real shot? No, you should definitely leave.
Oh, fuck off.
We then get a montage of what it would be like staying here. This montage is really, really, really beautiful. And these moments are something this game gets so right. Which is why, despite me not being the biggest fan of this game as a whole, it has enough here to draw me in still slightly. This is probably the biggest positive of the game.
Life goes on. You get a job working with Steph at the record store. All those years of being a music snob finally pay off.
We then are presented with a choice to leave or stay, and I think at this moment, the right choice for Alex is to leave Haven Springs given the trauma she has faced here. As us and Steph are leaving, we get waved away by everyone bar Ryan. It isn't ideal how he just gets completely ignored in this ending either, but it then cuts to us as we receive a text from Steph before starting the live performance, and this is how the game ends. It's not the most low-key ending of any Life is Strange game, and I guess it is fitting for this type of game. Now, I won't bother going over the other endings in this part because there really is no point. They really don't differ that much. If you really are that bothered, just go and watch a video on YouTube with them. But that's it for True Colours, and now we'll get into this episode as a whole, or chapter I should say actually. and it's another mixed bag for me. I really like the content of the flashbacks here, as it explores Alex's trauma throughout her life and really makes her a protagonist worth rooting for. I probably would have put her in the middle of protagonists here. I don't think she's as good as Max and Chloe, but I do prefer her to Sean if I had to be truthful. Now, mentioning the scene of the Black Lantern after them flashbacks, which I should say once again should have been split up. But the Black Lantern scene is good on its own, but in my opinion it's completely nullified due to the lack of choices matter, and it could have been a really good moment otherwise. I still enjoy Alex's contributions to this scene, but the other issues leave a sour taste in my mouth. Although I will say, contrary to popular opinion, I believe, I don't actually mind Jed as the twist villain. His motivations are very real, and he's acting quite honestly, I guess, for what a villain like him would, I guess. His actions seem realistic, but again, it just seems like they were trying to do another Jefferson. That is sort of a wider issue with this whole game. It just is sort of trying to act like the first game, but it sort of pales in comparison to that. And that's my whole issue with the game. It's just sort of low impact when you compare it to the other games. It's pretty inoffensive, which, I don't know, it's just, there's nothing controversial really. There's no topics it's really attacking deeply. And there are some, I get that, but I don't know, it doesn't hit me the same as the other games. Even the second game, which I'm not the biggest fan of, but I still prefer the impact of that, but whatever. Anyways, that sums up my thoughts on this episode alone, and some more of the whole wider game. This episode probably takes another C tier, which may seem a bit stupid at this point, the 4 out of the 5 episodes are in C tier, but it's how I feel. Most of the episodes in this game have a few moments that really shine, but it's either let down like issues like the choices in this one, or a lack of runtime, or content in general. Now to move on to my thoughts as True Colors as a whole, and you may think based off my ratings that I just don't like this game, but it's more complicated than that. I think this game is really strong in some elements. It just doesn't feel like a Life is Strange game to me. It feels like it's trying to do an impression of the first game, but without the darker undertones which make Life is Strange game so special to me. Now this game does have those moments, but the big shock of Gabe dying is spoiled to you before you play the game, if you played it on release. And they also just cram in our tragic backstory into the last episode to the point where half the finale is set in the past, which doesn't play greatly, I guess. The next big issue is the runtime of this game, which I've banged on about, and it is seriously shocking how short this game is. I'll put up the runtimes of all the episodes here. Just look at the difference. I'll let this sit on the screen for a minute. Now this runtime could work if the episodes were great from start to finish, but this game is still brimmed with filler. For example, a large chunk of this game is optional scenes where you can run around town and you can just miss them. I like these, but they should not be as big a percentage of the runtime as they are. Furthermore, the LARP in episode 3 is most of the episode, and it just contributes to a deeply unsatisfying feeling after most episodes where you just wonder, was that it? Funnily enough, the only one I didn't think that for was episode 1. But in that, I already knew what would happen at the start. I also would have liked more time in the game to develop a relationship between Alex and Steph or Ryan. I feel like we don't get enough time with them, which, again, is another issue with the runtime. The mystery element of this game also misses the mark for me. It was advertised as finding out what happened to our brother, but there is no mystery, really. We know who the main enemy is by the second chapter, which is Typhon. The only diversion you get is Mac, who is only a diversion for half an hour. But you barely spend any time uncovering the mystery either. You only speak to Mac in episode 2. Episode 3 you check the laptop and that's it. Then we instantly know Typhon abandoned episode 2, as I said. The only mystery is what Typhon actually do, which we figure out at the end of episode 3. They're burying something. There's no mystery surrounding Gabe's death, really. Compare this to the first game, where episode 3 and 4 spend a few hours at least on uncovering the mystery of Rachel, whilst also providing emotional character moments, which to be fair, this game also does well. But that's all. I say all, there's quite a lot. That's what I have to say against Life is Strange True Colors. Let's move into what I like now. I love the atmosphere of this game. It doesn't come close to Arcadia Bay personally, but I still like Haven Springs. Maybe it doesn't compare to Arcadia Bay having a lot of mysteries to uncover, whereas Haven Springs just seems like a pretty nice community with not much controversy bar Typhon. Other things this game has done well is the emotional moments, which I've said so many times, but this sort of is more on Alex reflecting on her past. With Gabe in particular, it just feels like a nice place to exist in, and I do like True Colors of putting me in this mindset where it gives me sort of a warm sense despite it's dealing with some wider themes such as grief in this game. Grief is probably the biggest theme of this game, alongside wanting to belong somewhere, which this game does so well with Alex. You can really feel those two core themes running throughout every decision she makes. I wish this game delved though into these emotions more, because we do get the feelings of grief, but they are quite minor. They could have gone darker with it in a way, I think, and it could have been more troubling in a way, more similar to the first game, but I still respect the approach they took, and it still is good, I think, the emotional side of this game. And as I said, the themes of wanting to belong are part of the final choice, where Alex can either stay or leave. It makes sense to maybe stay in Haven Springs, because Alex wants a place to call home, but as I said, the trauma in Haven Springs just make this a non-option for me. Maybe her and Steph can find this home on the road though, which fills me with hope. I believe there are comics set after this game also, but I actually haven't read them, maybe I should. But that's all on the themes of this game with grief and all that. The final points I will make is I can tell why they released this game all at once. It isn't long enough to justify an episodic release. Imagine you waited like 3 months or something for a chapter or episode or whatever, and it turned out that you got chapter 4, which was barely over an hour long. There would be riots. This release of the game contributes to me feeling like it doesn't feel like a Life is Strange game. It feels like an imitation of the first game. I would rank it below all the other games at this point, but we are not done with True Colours yet actually. We still have one more Life is Strange episode to play, and we're about to get into it. Bonus episode, Wavelengths. Well, it's time to play as Steph. This episode is called Wavelengths, and it sort of acts as a prequel where we play as Steph while she is managing the record store in about probably a year or so roughly before the events of True Colours, even more than a year, and then it ends a few months before True Colours starts. Well, actually 5 I think, bar the final scene. But anyway, we start off as Steph. We enter the radio booth in the record store. We also hear an interview in the background here. We find that Gabe recommended us for this job in the record store.
I just assumed
We also find out Steph quit her band to be here,
Be
where there's some
Gabe.
emotional baggage
Right.
because she had a relationship
There was
with
a breakup
a
involved.
member in the band.
Ah.
We start off by hosting the
So
radio
I
station on
wanna-
the first day. This is done by doing a bunch of tasks around the record store. We find out there's an animal in the walls. I wonder if it's that cat from True Colours. We also get a package from Mikey, who was in before the storm. He sent us the old D&D stuff we played in before the storm. Whilst managing the radio station,
Are you the psychic?
because of one phone call, people on the radio treat us like a psychic, which is silly but quite fun. It's a theme throughout this whole episode.
I did it, right?
There's also a funny moment where we speak to Gabe on air and we don't realise that our microphone is still on, so we say some stuff we shouldn't whilst live on air.
Convince me to bullshit my way through that interview.
You know you're on the air, right?
That ends the first part of this though, and then we cut to summer, as this game is split for all 4 seasons. We get a phone call on the last day of Pride Month, and some father says he reacted poorly to his son coming out to him. I like these calls, which give us people's personal problems. We get a slight insight into them, which does keep up the feelings of relationships carried out through every Life is Strange game. You sort of get a small window into many relationships of all different types.
Cheers.
Some other stuff to note during the summer sequence is the audio of Steph's old relationship whilst taking down the Pride decorations does hit emotionally. You can sense that she is carrying baggage as well, much like Alex is.
Out of the year.
I do like the commentary here on the LGBTQ+ community in this bonus episode. That is the theme I feel like this game approaches the most with its commentary. I also find the Chloe reference here very funny, where you can hear her audio of her actual line where she makes fun of all these big corporations only caring about the community for a month in the year, then just acting like they don't exist the rest of it, which is pretty true. The summer part then ends here though, and we move on to autumn, which is probably the heaviest sequence in this game.
It's just you haven't been yourself lately. You're working crazy hours, dodging calls.
Now Gabe texts us throughout this game, and we also get audio parts from points, and he says we haven't been ourselves recently, which You may realise that it is the anniversary of something quite traumatic. We'll get into that in a moment though. We decline a call from Mike, he also is trying to reach out to us. We've been airing him for a while basically. We'll get to this in a moment, but you know what this is the anniversary of, as I just said. We see a reference to Arcadia Bay on the laptop. Clearly the trauma of the storm still impacts Steph. At this point I think in this game it would be 5 years since then, which is actually a pretty big anniversary. We get some storm sounds while Steph is working around in the store. There are so many storm references. I'm also pretty sure Steph lost her mother in the storm, which does get referenced with Mike, I'm pretty sure. Steph is ready to drink her problems away here, as she seems quite traumatized and just pretty down about what's happened. She gets ready to go drinking with Gabe. We're about to leave the record store to start this, but we get interrupted by Mikey calling us. Obviously, he's some shared trauma with us about the storm. We speak to him on this laptop and play the GM campaign thing. I forget the name of fully.
Well, you know.
I'm not sure what it is. It doesn't really matter that much though. You play some game with Mikey, basically.
We playing or not?
We then get some audio clips of Rachel and Chloe with Mikey and Steph, which hit me deep.
I think Chloe and Rachel are playing their own game.
Steph says she wasted time being jealous of Chloe and Rachel. Now she feels guilty about not appreciating them enough in her life. We get references to Chloe and Max here also from Steph. She calls them the two wandering weirdos, which fills me with a smile. We get another audio clip of Steph and Mikey in the storm here playing D&D during all of this. Clearly this game generates trauma for Steph, which is completely understandable if you associate it with traumatic events. We then learn that Drew died in the storm. He was Mikey's brother if you don't remember. We had that sequence with Chloe where we took his money and then that Damon guy came along. Quite a fun sequence from before the storm, if I remember correctly.
Your position.
Hey, listen.
I think we also get audio here of Steph and Mike, if I remember correctly. And I may be wrong here, but
1 year.
that is a year after the storm where they discuss going back to Arcadia Bay a year later. Stefan says, why is Mikey here speaking to her currently when she constantly ghosted him? Mikey says he needs Steph though. He says when they hang out it brings a part of him back from the dead. Clearly Mikey still has a lot of trauma from the storm, which is only natural if you lose someone like a brother to you. Steph says since Arcadia Bay, whenever she cares about someone it seems to go away eventually.
It's a matter of time before I find
Which ties into the themes of her losing her bandmate and partner. Part of this conversation with Mikey, that ends the autumn section here, so we are in winter, which is near the end of the game. Gabe calls and talks to us about Alex coming here soon. He says it's been 7 years and he hasn't got in touch, so he was terrified of talking to her given what she's been through. Obviously we know it's quite a lot. Gabe asks us what will happen if he calls Alex. We say it would go well when Gabe calls her initially, but Steph says that Gabe will feel the weight of someone depending on him, which will teach Gabe into being responsible. In this winter segment, Steph seems at peace and quite happy at this point, which is nice to see after the trauma of that autumn part. We then get an envelope sent by Gabe and it turns out to be a scavenger hunt. We get a plaque from this with our name on it from the scavenger hunt, which is nice, Gabe. We then celebrate the new year by ourselves as our cat in the record store. Well, the cat's not there, but we say Happy New Year to her regardless. That ends the winter segment though. But then we cut to one final scene where Ryan's in the store and we see the cat, which is reminiscent of a scene from True Colors, if you remember. Steph is playing with a sword.
How's it going?
Hey, Steph.
We then get a caller who wants us to tell the future, like the psychic thing that's been throughout this whole game. But we say life is interesting if you don't try to predict everything first, which is very true.
Not really. Just started thinking life's more interesting if you don't try to predict everything first.
We also see Steph job hunting here on the laptop in Seattle. She's preparing to leave Haven Springs, which fits in with the context of this game and also Steph wanting to leave in True Colors. But then Alex appears behind us, which ties us into the first time we see her in the original game. It's quite interesting. For all we know, if Alex arrived a couple of days later, Steph could have gone. But that ends Wavelengths, and I actually really like this. Some people may find this episode boring, but I just like the day-to-day normality of managing the record store and radio station. Furthermore, it's nice to see Arcadia Bay references, and this is where we actually properly see the consequences of our decision in the first game if you sacrificed Arcadia Bay. This episode actually makes me ever so slightly more likely to sacrifice Chloe, but I still wouldn't. I also really like the seasonal elements of this game, and it sort of does relate to how our moods change depending on the time of the year, which I'm sure a lot of people relate to. Particularly around events that happen at certain points of the year. Sometimes the holidays bring back past traumas for people. This also sets up Steph to better herself in the end, which is lovely to see, which sets her up for the main game, where she seems a lot more positive compared to the autumn part of this game. This episode also has a more than acceptable runtime, and if anything, this is the one episode where they could get away with it being quite short. I'm not sure though. I also should mention here, which I didn't mention in the previous part here, that the pandemic really impacted the creation of this game, so I do actually get why the main game was shorter, and also why this bonus episode is confined to only one location. The one location thing works though when it's basically just a character study on one person, Steph in this case. This episode also embodies the Life is Strange vibe to me. We have a protagonist who has been through quite a lot and has to reckon with what's going on around them, despite them suffering mentally. This is the most similar thing we get to Before the Storm, partly due to the prequel aspect, also due to us playing with someone who has no powers. In Before the Storm, Chloe attempts to deal with trauma, and it's the same here, but on a slightly smaller scale. I'm sure if this was made into a multiple episode thing though, they'd dive deeper into Steph's trauma though. This episode probably makes it into the B tier actually, if I'm being honest. The only thing working against it is the repetition of some of the tasks, but I don't mind it that much. I quite like this episode for what it is, and I really respect it. I kind of wish the main game took as much attention to detail on its main plot points and character points, I guess, as this bonus episode did. Well, that's it then for True Colours and this series as a whole. I'd like to thank all of those who have tuned in up to this point for part 4 of this series. We still need to rank every episode from worst to best, which will be the next video now. That should take quite a while to do though, so bear with me on that, but it will be out eventually. You can clearly tell I'm not as big of a True Colours fan as I am the other games, but I still enjoy this game slightly. I just feel like its flaws are much bigger than the other games, and I feel like it's a bit dull, to be honest. But we'll get into that further into the next part. I'd like to thank you all for watching, and make sure to like and subscribe if you enjoyed this video, and I'll see you for the overall ranking. Thank you and bye.